Thank you very much, Speaker. That was a typical Labor speech. Over time, over budget, couldn't finish on the right time and ended up with nothing in it that was eventually or of value to anyone. But it's actually quite interesting. It's quite interesting because I've had the pleasure of reading the newspapers recently, and I noticed a specific article that it was kind of like reading a bit of comedy.
Member for Berwick.
A bit of comedy what's going on.
Assistance.
And one of the articles I read, and I know that the member for Nepean will be interested in this, was just recently that the Andrews Labor government have put out that they are interested in putting in for the World Cup to be here in Victoria. So they've gone out to the world and said, we would love the opportunity to go and get the World Cup here in Victoria a week and a half after they cancelled the Commonwealth Games because they couldn't manage that. So anyone on FIFA who could have seriously had a look at, and who wouldn't want the World Cup here in Victoria, let's be honest, who would not want it here? And as a massive soccer fan myself, I would love to see some of the world's best here. But let's be honest, if you were on the board at FIFA, we did have the world's best women. Guess what? They played up in Sydney and Queensland because your government couldn't get them here to Melbourne.
Through the chair, member for Berwick.
We had one game in Melbourne for Australia and you couldn't get the final at the best game, at the best ground in this country. You could not get it here.
Order. The member for Berwick to resume his seat. Member for Melton, without assistance.
The motion is
I haven't called you yet, member for Bentley, but I will. On a point of order.
Deputy Speaker, the motion is on the budget. The member for Berwick has not even commenced speaking on the budget, and he is 2 minutes in. I ask that you bring him back to the motion.
Order. It is on the point of order, member for Berwick.
I would be more than happy, as the Premier would offer us, to give you a briefing on how the budget impacts sport here in Victoria and how the Women's World Cup was part of the budget to be here in Victoria.
Thank you, member for Berwick. There is no point of order. The member to continue through the chair.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. So the government are now opting to say they want to have the World Cup when they didn't have the competence to run the Commonwealth Games. Now, when you spend $380 million to not host an event, the only thing I could think that would go through the board of FIFA would be, what a fantastic opportunity for an investment into our own accounts. What we could do is say you could give it to them, we'll have a backup plan ready to go, and we'll be guaranteed to be able to sue them later on and get the money because this government does not have the competence to deliver that major sporting event. But how does the budget impact everyday lives at the moment? And I'll talk specifically about my portfolios today. But police. Police in Victoria have more than 800 vacancies. And I find it, again, almost a comedy act when the government continue to go out and say, we are increasing the numbers of Victoria Police across this state. So we're seeing 24-hour stations that have been closed. We're now starting to see one-man stations through regional Victoria, where they're wanting to move staff out of those one-man stations, making regional communities more unsafe. We have 98 one-man stations across the state, 98 of them. And this government has said to the Victorian Police Association they want to get rid of Clause 184, which specifically states that we can only remove the one man from one-man stations, the one officer, in the case of an emergency. Would be terrorist attack, natural disasters, where we can use them or utilise them in a way that is required for a safety outcome. They want to alter that to effectively make it operational services. So what the government wants to do is remove the protection from regional Victoria, where they can have a guaranteed police officer in their town. By removing that, they can move them into metro areas or Labor seats where 24-hour stations are closing. And we've seen it all too often. We've seen it at Pakenham. The 24-hour police station there has been closed on many occasions. The doors are locked. So when people go to the station, they've got no one there to serve them. And let's be honest, Deputy Speaker, why do you go to a police station? There's a mix of people that would come into a police station, some on bail. And when they come in to sign on bail, there's no one there to sign them in. That's unfair on the person on bail. It's unfair on the community because we're not guaranteeing the safety of the people who are or aren't coming in. People who want to get a stat deck signed. If they can't get it signed, I'm sure I'd love to say to them, come to my office, but as many would know, I currently don't have an office because we're having a few issues trying to find one of those. But I will offer the member for Pakenham's office for that in offices, so if you need to get a stat deck signed, we can go down there because it's not that far from there. And it was my former office, if anyone wants to know the address of it. We could also have people come in who want to report a crime, who are victims of crime, who may have been raped and want to come forward into a station in a safe place so they can make that report. But at the moment, those doors are locked. And for the government to continually hype up that they are putting more police in there when we have 800 vacancies is simply misleading the community. Cherry Creek. Cherry Creek is the new youth detention centre that has been built out in the Western Victoria, where recently, the first time, we're starting to see young offenders be relocated from Malmesbury and Parkville. And there's many, many warnings for this government about some of the concerns that have been raised around Cherry Creek. First and foremost is around staff safety. You must provide a safe workplace. We all know that. Every person in this room should know that. Yet, after a negotiation between the union and the government, it was decided you'd have to have a minimum 30% experienced staff. Now, just to put it into perspective, because I know the minister is trying to say that they have people who are trained, there is a difference between someone who is trained and someone who is experienced. And the example would be, and I know the member from Melton would agree, you wouldn't put an ambulance out with someone who's just trained. You would always have someone who's got experience with them. As a former police officer, you would not put out two new recruits on day one together. You would put someone experienced with them. And at Cherry Creek, they've got 5%, only 5% experienced staff. And they were warned this was going to be a problem. And how did it end up impacting it? Within 5 days, one of those staff was in hospital after getting their head stomped on by only the 4 inmates that were in there. And who did they transfer when they've got the least experienced staff? They've transferred people who are on sentence or remand for murder. They didn't transport the minimum security, they've transported the maximum security offenders. Then the next cohort to come in was another 5 of the maximum security, who when they got there all had their security rating lowered because it suited the government's agenda. But it didn't suit the agenda of a staff member getting his head stomped on for telling an offender that he could not wear slides into the kitchen and had to put shoes on. And it will get worse. The next cohort to come through are the highest risk in the youth detention centres, and we still don't have the experience there. Even worse, Deputy Speaker, staff are now asking for transfers back over to Parkville because of safety concerns. They're transporting some young offenders from up in Malmesbury, and this is how broken the system is. They've emptied one of the units, moved them down there, except one young man who turns around and says, "I'm not going." Now, it's been a while since I've worked in a prison, but I don't think you have that say. You don't sit there, it's not your son in the bedroom, and you take the TV away. You say, "No, you're going." But no one will sign off for a use of force to move this young person from Malmesbury to to Cherry Creek. So what does that mean? It now means we've got 2 staff, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, sitting with this one person in a unit. They haven't got the staff allocation, so the other 38 offenders have 2 less staff sitting with them. And who does that put at risk? That puts at risk not just the young people, it puts at risk the staff. And the union speaking about it, the staff on the scene are speaking about it, the media is speaking about it, and the minister didn't even know about it. The minister in the other house didn't even know about it. That's a huge problem. That's because the budget is in disarray. They are struggling to get staff where they need them, and we're not seeing these young people protected. And in the justice system, where are we spending the money? We've got the Western Plains Prison. Western Plains Prison. We're spending $36 million a year on security to stop people going in to a prison that's empty. $36 million a year, on a prison to keep people out because it's empty. Imagine if you had those security staff who are currently sitting at a prison that's empty available to be in Cherry Creek. Do you know what might have happened, Deputy Speaker? There wouldn't be someone in hospital today. That's what would have happened, because they would have had the protection they needed. We would have had experienced staff in the places we need them. And that is so important to make sure we do. And worse than this, $36 million a day to protect a prison that's closed is money that could have been spent on programs to keep people out of prison. Now let's focus on young people. Already in this budget, there is $10 million cut from crime prevention programs. $10 million cut. These are programs to stop young offenders who are entering the justice system to continuing down that path and ending up as long-term people who go through this justice system generally for life. We all know, anyone who's done any research, the trajectory of a child who goes into a detention centre is far worse with the outcomes than someone who doesn't enter it if both have committed crimes. If you can keep them out of a detention centre, give them the opportunities, programs and tools that'll best suit them, then the outcomes are a lot better. We should be having a simple focus in our justice system, particularly youth justice. We should be making sure every person that enters the justice system, whether on detention or other sentences, that our end goal is, can we make them work ready? Can we give them the opportunity and the tools to make them work ready? Can we return them to education? Is there an opportunity, whether it's through community education, further education, or back within any other system, state or private, can we get them back to education? Or third, can we return them to the services that they most need? And when I say the services they most need, that could be mental health, drugs, alcohol. So we've got a budget that's going to be cutting funds on what we're doing for prevention, whereas what we should be doing is looking at programs around the world, like 24/7 sobriety programs, programs that target people who enter the system, and rather than treat the crime, we treat the reason they committed the crime. And it can be done. And you would think most on the outside of these walls would go, hold on, that's a left-wing policy. Let me assure you, us on this side of the House are so committed to criminal justice reform and every step of the way using these budgets that we can then put in place programs to keep people out of prison. And the more people you can keep out using the correct programs and setting them up, everybody wins. Why? Because we can spend less money on jails. In Texas alone, by using programs like this, including drug and alcohol rehabilitation, mental health rehabilitation, stopping putting people within the prison system who we are simply just mad at, and putting people in jail who we are genuinely afraid of, they've closed 15 prisons. Billions and billions of dollars that goes back into the government. And over there, obviously good right-wing government, they've just reduced taxes and also implemented further programs and what they need. And those programs and cutting taxes creates jobs, and more jobs is less people committing crime. It's not that hard. This is simple maths. And then if we have less people committing crime, we have a better outcome for the community. And I know for a fact, and I don't refer to people in the gallery, but I know we've got a volunteer in the gallery here with us today who's done many years in the CFA. And if we can get people not committing crime and supporting our community, I am sure people like Tony would be absolutely loving seeing them come through our CFAs, coming into our organisations where they can give back. Go out as a sports coach. Be a genuine person and contributor in our community. It's not that difficult. We've got a budget here that we can do it, but the fear I have now is we're spending money on programs that aren't coming. We're cutting money on the investments that is keeping people out of prisons. We're spending money on bricks and mortar with no one in them. We're not investing in the staff to ensure that we can deliver the programs in the Youth Justice Centre. We're not guaranteeing the safety of the staff within those prison systems. And all of these because the Andrews Labor government have let this budget get so out of control that their only focus now, and for the next few years, will be how do we pay it off, how do we pay down the debt, and how do we maintain just that interest without impacting the services and building a better Victoria.